Sunday morning. It's a perfect winter day to snuggle up in this great quilt that I just recently made. It's called the Ohio Star Scrappy Happy Quilt Block Quilt because it's all made of Ohio stars, all different fussy cut of the same block, so there's not a lot of thinking, and it's the easiest quilt in the world to make. Each section was quilted individually. So I'm going to show you how to pick the fabrics, how to fussy cut each little piece, how to construct the block, how to add the little borders and then quilt it, and then assemble them one by one. So we'll be back and we'll get started with picking fabrics. So here is the template PDF. It should print out at its normal size since it's a PDF, but it's hard for me to know what everybody's printing settings will be. So just make sure that the square measures 4.5 inches, and if that's true, then the triangle's the right size. And trace the outline of the template, and those outlines include the seam allowance, so that's what you'll be cutting, you'll be using to cut your fabric. And it's good to use the see-through plastic because then you can kind of fussy cut. Now we're not going like really exact fussy cut, we're kind of eyeing it up. If we get too precise, then the quilt is going to start to look really formal. And the whole point of this quilt is to use your stash. So as you can see here, I've got, just piles of fabrics that, I've used, and that this is what I have left over. So of course we have to come up with a plan to use all of our stash. So and then anyway, the last thing I want to say about the template is I love these creative grid rulers. They're grippy on the back so that they grab your fabric when you're turning it on your cutting board. So this is what I use for the square. Actually, you could use your template square, that's fine. This just is a little heavier duty. And then of course this is the template plastic that I used, and I just took a jelly roll pen or a micron pen to trace around it. So that's the cutting line. You could use whatever you want to, it doesn't matter, to trace, but we'll get into that. I'll show you how to do that. But right now it's about picking fabrics. So as you can see, I've got a pile of fabrics here, and the Ohio Star block, if you're looking at your template, is it's really simple to construct. You've got your center square and your 4 outer squares. Okay, so those are all 4.5 inch squares. And then the triangles, which are the top and bottom and the side squares, are worked by fitting together these triangles. And we're going to be working, the half square triangle kind of chain piecing method later. And basically, as far as choosing fabric goes, you can start anywhere. So let's just start by the easiest one, I think, is to start in the center. So going through your fabrics, find one, any fabrics will do. My only rule for this one is no solids. So find for the center one, maybe, oh, here's a cool one. Find one that you can fussy cut. You could take your grid ruler and you can lay it on there, and you can envision that's going to be pretty cute fussy cut. So that's our center, okay? So we'll just lay that out. And then, let's see, so we need to have the 4 triangles that surround the square. So let's see, maybe I will pick, oh, I don't know. That would be kind of a cool one. I don't know if I have enough of that one. We're just cutting 4 oh, this is a really cool one. Plus I think these fabrics are by the same person. Okay, so that's my triangle that's going to surround all 4 of these. And now we have to pick the star points. So I want to pull maybe a fabric that that sort of go with these two. Not as solid, but maybe something that isn't quite as busy. So something that reads one color, like this one might be really pretty. That's maybe a little lighter than I want. I want something darker. Oh, here's a red. This one would be cool. Okay, so that's my star point. Now, for the star to stick out, it has to be the little triangle that goes across the top, and the squares and the corners have got to be a contrast, either contrast by value or by hue. So I'm using, this is a pretty warm, dark color red. These are some aquas. It's very dark. It's got a black background. So I think I'm going to go with something really light in the four corners. So just picking through, like something like this might be kind of fun. Then in the four corners, same thing. We want to have a contrast there. This one's actually pretty cool because this is one of those light blue fabrics, but it's still got these pink dots in it, so it's going to all sort of read together. So you can see these are not all from the same line of fabric. They're not even in the same genre of fabric. We've got some vintage here, get sort of a geometric print going. These are leaves, so this is a pretty traditional print. So those I think would be good. You know, you don't really know it's going to be great until you start cutting, because we're looking at this all pretty much the same amount of fabrics. But of course, as we cut, that's going to change. But I think it's worth looking at. So we're going to set those 5 aside, and then let's just do one more, maybe starting from a different place, just so you can kind of get the idea of my thought process as I'm choosing fabric. So star points. Let's start at the star points. I'm going to choose this one because this is a small print. The most important thing about this is that the star points stick out. So what we're going to do is we're going to find a fabric that's going to go on the sides. Maybe we'll do the middle last. How about that? This one's kind of cool. Let's see, what else do I have in this pile? It's so fun digging through piles. It does make a mess in the studio, of course, but oh well. What's more fun than playing in fabric, right? Honestly. Let's see. Okay, so these would be fun to cut the square with the leaf kind of in the corner. So what I would do in this case is put the point of the square here. My chandeliers. The light. Anyway, so I would cut this, I would find 4 leaves, cut them here, and then I would have 4 leaves coming out from the star point. So I think that's actually a really cool one. Okay, now I've got some pink introduced here, and this might be a great one for the little triangles in between the stars. Now, these fabrics are both really dark, so I'm not doing different contrast by value. I'm doing different contrast by hue. I've got some yellow in this one, so maybe I want to do some yellow. Let's see, maybe this one would be kind of cool for the one that surrounds the square. Or I've got this one with these little birds. How cute would he be? So when you find this, then what you want to do is find, make sure that your print, he may not be the best. He's going to be better for a square because I can't fit that whole bird in that. So I know that's not the best choice. And then I think I'm just going to go crazy and go really bright. This one. Really bright for the center. I can find a motif. You can see, look at this fabric. I've talked about a lot of these. Oops. Let's see, get this in camera. I mean, is that funny? So obviously I've already used some of this fabric in some square, but this flower, like this one right here, would be a really, really pretty center. And just to make sure that it's going to fit, I take my little template or my creative grid ruler, I put it over the fabric, and yeah, that's going to be great. I would just center that right in that little flower and then cut around it. And I think that would be a great center. But we'll see. It's hard, like I said, it's hard to know until you actually start cutting. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first one that we kind of picked out. And if it looks like I'm sitting on the floor, I am. Because I love sitting on the floor. Everything can just kind of be spread out. So that's sort of that's my MO. I love to be on the floor. I'm going to enjoy that while I can. I'm approaching 50, so that's not going to last forever. I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. Okay, so anyway, because I'm using the creative grid ruler, I can just cut around it. And I wouldn't do that with the template plastic because honestly, it is just, you're going to shave a slice off your template and then everything is going to be cuckoo after that. So just when you're using your triangle template, or if you're using the square template, just draw around it and cut around it like I'll show you here in just a minute. So, but here, I can just cut 2 sides. so there's my center square. Easy enough. We'll put that aside over here. Then we decided on this fabric. Another great thing about this little print is we don't really have to fussy cut. We can just sort of put it on the fabric and trace it. It can go on the back side or front side, doesn't really matter. I usually do the front just because it's easier, that's what I'm looking at. And I take a Jelly Roll pen and just, I like these shimmering Jelly Roll pens because you can see what you're doing on any color fabric, just kind of shines in the light. Oh, until you move it. Hang on, now we gotta line that back up. Okay. The template's nice because it lets you cut those little corners off, so it's much easier to match things up later. Okay, so I'm going to do that 4 times and cut all of those out, and that's obviously going to be with scissors. I think I have my scissors over here. You get the idea. You do not need to watch me cut 4 of these and 8 of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all of the things out that we've chosen, line them up for you, and then we'll see what they look like as stars, see if we like them. Okay, so here's the first star all cut out and put together. I like it. You definitely can see that it's a star. The only thing that kind of leaves me a little underwhelmed are these. I cut them double, so, you know, just to save time, especially on the star points where the fabric is a small print. You can double up the fabric and trace your template and cut out 2 at a time. No more than 2 at a time, but you could do 2 at a time. And I tried to do that here, where these really look better if they're a little bit more planned out. You know, I don't want you to go exact, but let's try something different. So these are not a waist. These I'm going to use in a different square. So I'm going to pop those aside. And what I decided to do was kind of take this light blue theme here, and I didn't have enough fabric to cut all 4 the exact same. So I cut 2 and 2, and then I just make sure that when I piece them that they're across from each other just so it's a little bit more symmetrical. And that star just seems to be, I don't know, a little richer, a little better. It kind of, the blue here brings in this blue and also picks up this blue, even though it's a completely different shade. It still just sort of works better. So trust your instinct on that. There really is no right or wrong. The great way to look at this is that you're making a huge quilt and it has a big grand scheme, and that grand scheme is that it's supposed to be kind of scrappy. Totally scrappy, actually. So try not to get too bogged down in the details. If you see something that you know is going to stand out, just like these the little ones I had before, and I didn't fussy cut them right. I knew that would kind of stand out. It probably wouldn't matter. No one else would even notice that. But I like those little, yes, those aha moments, those jolts of, yes, this is right, and I don't need to even ask anyone else's opinion because I know that I'm making the right decision. And if you just listen to your voice, you'll have that too. Everybody has that. Okay, so that's the first one. And then let me show you the second one. I even like that one better. And I didn't think I was going to, so it's really funny when you start to cut these and put the fabrics in the right place. It's amazing what happens. Okay, so next I'm going to show you how to piece them, and the order, and how to press them so that they all fit together and snuggle up, and you'll have a perfect 12.5-inch Ohio block square. So I'm at my machine. I've got my 1/4-inch foot on. If you have a 1/4-inch foot, a lot of times they'll come with a little blade right here, so you can either butt your fabric right up against that. If you don't have a 1/4 inch foot, that's okay. These markings obviously are great along your machine, and you also could put a piece of masking tape or several Post-its. I know some people do, just so that you can butt your fabric right up against that Post-it note and ensure that you're getting the same seam throughout. Okay, that's really important. So whenever I'm about to do a block, I'll lay it out like this, just like it's supposed to go. I know that these are the 4 corners, so I can take those away for now. I know this is the center, so I can take that away, which leaves the quarter square triangles, I guess you could call these. So I know that if I keep them all in the same sort of order, I'll be able to just chain piece them. So all of these units will be here, because if you turn each one, they are all the same. So the first thing we're going to do is stitch these guys together. I have Aurifil thread in my machine. I love Aurifil thread for piecing. It's a 50 weight 2-ply thread. I have a brown in there just because brown will sort of blend in with everything, I think. And I've got the same thing in the bobbin. Here, let's make sure the triangle is completely covering the other triangle, and just start. Okay. Here I like a down position so that when I chain piece, I can just slide that next one right up into that needle. Again, okay, now you're going to cut these apart. Now, pressing fabrics. A lot of times people will say press to the dark. You can completely do that. In this case, I think, just so you don't have to think about it, I'm always going to press the fabric to the star point. That way when I line the other star point up, it will fit. Those seams will be lying away from each other, and they'll snuggle right in, and you'll have a perfect little point there, perfect line, perfect match. Okay, so in order to do that, you're going to lay the triangle. Oops, let me get over here. You're going to lay the triangle so that the fabric that you're pressing the seam towards is up. Just open it up, and you can finger press it at this point. I just usually run my nail over it, and that's good enough. There's seam rollers you can do. You certainly could press it at this point. I think that pressing is fine as long as you're just hitting it one time with an iron. You could distort the fabric pieces, especially since we completely disregarded the grain of the fabric to cut these out. In this case, we didn't really think about that because it's more about the image that you're trying to cut out of the fabric, not the grain of fabric. So try just not to be pulling and pushing them too much. So you're going to go ahead and finger press all of these open, all of them to the dark. Give a little fingernail press, and that's good enough. We're going to go ahead and do chain piece these, and then I will show you how to get them together and snuggle up the seams. This is what we're talking about when we say snuggle the seams. This seam is going this way, this seam is going the other way, and when you kind of manipulate the fabrics into each other, you get this nice little snuggle effect. I don't even put a pin in. You sure could if you feel good about it, but that pretty much is going to ensure that we're going to have a nice continuous line. Okay, let's see. But I do hold it. I hold it really tight there and make sure that it's flat. If the seam's not snuggled properly, you'll be able to feel a little space in there, or if they're lying on top of each other, you'll feel a little lumps. When you open it up, you've got a perfect seam. They match great. Okay, and these can be pressed. They'll sort of tell, your seams will sort of tell you which way they want to be pressed. You could open them at this point if you're not a fan of the bulk in the corners. But either way, it doesn't really matter at this point, because the next time we're going to sew these to a square and we're going to press the seam towards a square. And once I get all of these done, I do hit it with an iron just so they're nice and flat to go forward. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of these, and then we'll put the rest of the block together. Okay, so I've got the block arranged again how I'm going to sew it together. I have ensured that my two purples are facing for symmetry. And the rest of this block is really simple to put together. Main piece these. So basically just, it's important to lay the block out too, because that way you've got the order of things. Otherwise you could sew this leaf upside down. You don't want to do that. It's not a big deal to take it out, but you know, this is supposed to be a quick and easy block, not a hair pulling block. Okay, then these get cut apart and you'll lie them out just how they were. Press to the block side. That eliminates some of the bulk on your pieced square. Okay, put those right back. Making sure they're in the correct order again. Okay, goes in the middle. Okay, and now we're going to put these on to their corresponding row. The nice thing about using these templates without the points on them is that you don't have the little dog ears to clip. But what you do want to make sure you're doing is clipping the threads. Those, if you're putting this block together and you're quilting it and these little threads are behind a light fabric, you'll see them in the quilt. It'll drive you crazy, and by the time you see them, you already have it half quilted and you can't really take it out very easily. So just make sure you clip all your threads. I know it's a pain, but it'll be worth it in the end. So you've got your 3 rows. It's important to press the seams towards the unpieced block. So in the top and bottom row, you're going to piece them towards the corners, towards the outside blocks. And then the middle one, you're going to press the seam towards the inside block. And that way, when you go to sew these blocks together, you can snuggle this seam, and you know, because this seam is long, I do like to pop a little pin right in the seam. So I'll just make sure it's coming out. It's coming out the other side too. And then this seam will snuggle right up. And then you're just going to go ahead and sew the rows together. But before I do that, I'm going to take the pins back out and just give it a little press. If you're just cutting with a long, 6 by 24 inch ruler on your cutting mat, that's fine. Make sure that you line it up just how I have it here. With the blocks on the sides are now 4 1/4. Remember, they were 4 1/2, but we've lost 1/4 of an inch in the seaming. So when you lay your block out to cut, you want to have your ruler lined up so that the 4 1/4 inch mark runs all the way up the seam. That ensures that you're not cutting too much off of one side and that the block will remain square and straight. Okay, so that's just a nice little note on cutting. If there are places where it's just under that 4 1/4, that can be worked into the seam. So don't panic if yours is like 1/8 of an inch off. It's going to be okay. Ta-da! So here they are, 2 blocks. How easy was that? They take about 45 minutes to pick the fabric and cut, and about 15 minutes to put them together. So it's, it's one of those things where it's just really super simple. So if you are one of my fellow guild members, stop right here. I'm going to go on to how I quilted these, maybe what I would do differently, and also how to I'll just give a brief overview of how to join them. If you are coming to the May meeting, what you're going to do is take a micron pen and just sign your name on one of the inside seams. Don't sign it on the outside, just sign it on the inside, so that when we play the game, we all know whose block that we are going home with. So you will make, remember, 3, 6, or 9. Come to the guild meeting, which is the second Thursday in May. And if you make 3, you get to play the first round. If you make 6 blocks, you'll be able to play 2 rounds. And if you make all 9 blocks, you'll be able to play all 3 rounds. So it's going to be really fun, I think. We're basically, you choose the blocks based on the roll of the dice, and I know you have more information on that on the newsletter. If you are in the Denver metro area and you're interested in our guild, it's the Arapahoe County Quilt Guild. It's a wonderful guild with great girls and boys. And we meet the second Thursday night of every month, and you can go to www.acqcolorado.org to look for more information. There'll be information on our block exchange party and all of the wonderful speakers that we've got coming for 2017. So definitely join us. If you have any questions, of course, just email me or reply to this video and you'll be fine. So if you are coming and you're part of the guild and you're watching this to get a better idea of how to make these blocks, great. Stop right here. Do not come to the Quilt Guild meeting with these blocks quilted. This is just for after, if you want to quilt these yourself. Okay, so before you decide on how you're going to quilt these blocks, you have to decide on if you want to join with the sashing or if you want to have a border built right in. You could join them together without any sort of sashing, but you are limited on the quilting pattern because you've got to stay within 1/2 of an inch from the outside edges to be able to join them. So in my mind, I wanted sashing just to make it easier so that I could quilt a pattern all the way out to the points of the triangles. I really wanted to do that, so I decided to put the blocks together with sashing. But I didn't want the 1/2 inch sashing that's really common to put blocks together. It's fine, it's a great look, it's more formal than I wanted. And I sort of wanted the quilt a little bit bigger, so I decided to put a colorful sashing of 2.5 inches. Here's a diagram of what the whole layout will look like when you're putting this quilt together. So you can see that the bottom right hand square has no sashing whatsoever, and all of the squares on the right column have just the sashing on the bottom, and all of the squares going along the bottom have just the sashing on the right hand side, and the rest have a sashing on the right hand side and on the bottom, and then the 2.5 inch square. I mean, essentially what you're going to do is cut 2, this is for each block, cut 2 strips 2.5 by 12.5 inches. Jelly rolls are a great thing to use here, leftover jelly roll strips. And then cut yourself a 2.5 inch square. And do that with the blocks that need the 2 sides, if you refer back to the diagram, which is most of them. And then you're going to measure the block, and it will measure 14.5 inches. So that means you're going to want to cut a square, if you're quilting these yourself, of course, you're going to want to cut a square that's 16.5 inches of a back. Then cut the batting exactly that width. First thing that you're going to do is you're going to ditch every seam. That stabilizes the piece. It's really easy to do, and it kind of gets you acquainted with your block. Make sure if you have a walking foot, use your walking foot. It's so much easier to ditch with a walking foot so that things don't slide around. And you certainly could leave it like this and not go any further with it. It is quilted plenty enough. But I do want to mention one thing. When we put this quilted block together with another, we have got to stay away from this 1/2 inch section here, because that's what we're going to be using to join this to the next piece. So when ditching, just stop here, you can knot it, and then stop here and you can knot it. The rest of this can be ditched. You can ditch all the way out to the edge here, because this is the piece that will be joining the other one too. So you don't have to leave the 1/2 inch on these two sides, because that will be joined with one of these. So you can put a piece of blue tape here so that reminds you not to ever quilt into this part here. Okay, so the square's all ditched out and it's secure and stable, so all pins and everything can be removed. That is such a nice part about ditching. If you look at the picture of my original quilting design, it got pretty dense in the corners between the star points. And I used a batting that had fusible on it, which I love for quilting, but it takes a little bit to wash out. And so if you're going to do a dense amount of quilting on it, it's just not going to be as soft until time takes its toll on it and it's been washed. I did wash mine a couple times and it is softening up. But remember, the more quilting that you do on this, the stiffer the piece is going to be. So if you want it to be kind of a cozy, cuddly quilt, you actually could stop right here and put it together. This time I'm going to keep the quilting a little less involved, so that really I can just show you a couple different quilting motifs, and then I want to get to sort of doing a quick little demo on how I would join two squares together. I'm not even marking the quilt because it's an organic shape. It isn't anything real geometric that we have to focus on, so I'm just going to wing it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is bring up your thread. And I'm just going to work something really easy. Come up here to this point, come on back down, okay, so notice that I'm sort of stopping just short of that center thing. That's so that all the thread doesn't get bunched up in that middle. Cut my threads now. And I'm just going to work a long petal and a short petal, long petal, short petal, just to go around the block. So I'll do that real quick. If you are a directional quilter, meaning you're not comfortable going sideways, that's the beauty of this. You can just turn it and go for it how it's comfortable. And that's good enough for the center thing. Easy. I tend to weave my ends in as I go, so I just bring that thread back, put it on a needle, and then weave it on in. Okay, and then for outside the star, I'm going to work one of my favorite little quilting motifs right now. It's just a ribbon. It's super simple. It's just as easy as stippling. I love stippling, but it's kind of nice to have some variety. The bobbin thread has to be a little thinner, and the top thread has got to be a little thicker if they're not exactly the same. And I know I keep bringing up the book, but I'm really excited about it, and it's just such a great way for you to be able to learn how to quilt your own pieces in smaller sections. Yeah, I really just want everybody to be able to do this if they want to. Nothing against the long armor. I love long armors, and I love that art, and I love that skill. It's just a totally different way to make a quilt. Okay, so now that we're back to the beginning, we're going to do that. We're going to follow that path again. Sometimes going aside of it and sometimes crossing over it, just so it looks kind of like a little ribbon line there. It's really pretty. And that's enough quilting. That's going to stay nice and squishy. As far as what to do on the side seams, I really thought it was easy to put together when I did a line a half of an inch away from here. You don't have to, though. I know my mom, hi mommy, my mom made this and she did all solid sashings. It was beautiful, and she'd worked just a quilt line from her machine down the center of them, and that works really good too. So you could decide. Maybe I'll do that this time, since last time I did a line down the side, and I think so. I'm going to take the machine off of free motion setting, put my walking foot back on, and then just choose a really simple design to run down the center of the sashing. Okay, so I chose a diamond pattern to run down the center, but keep in mind that the center of this is not truly the center, because remember, we're going to lose, we need to leave a half of an inch for joining, but we're going to lose a fourth of an inch visually, because that's going to obviously be into another seam. So it's the center minus this 1/4 inch. So if you just take that off and line it up, you could even draw a line down the center once that 1/4 inch is removed, and then go ahead and work your design. Okay, so not bad considering I didn't measure. You will definitely want to measure. This is one of those cases where I'm just trying to whip this out so you guys can sort of see how it's done. I probably would have chosen a different color, but that's okay. At least you can know now that I've quilted my whole block, let's just say. I'm not going to do anything in here. I've got this whole side now that I can join to my neck side. It's free and clear. I'm going to show you how to cut that, and then just do a little fake demo on how to actually join it. Honestly, I probably would not. Knowing what I know now, I had quilted a little thing in the center, and it just took a long time, and it wasn't really maximum return. So probably what I would do the next time I make this quilt, or a quilt like it, is I would just join them, and then I would hand stitch something here, or even hand stitch ribbons. You know, I'm all about cross crafting, as you know, so I would probably do something embroidery wise, or maybe pop a button or a yo-yo in each center. It's just fun to play with, and those kinds of ideas will pop into your head when you're in your studio sewing and playing. So make sure you journal all of your thoughts down, because that's where the ideas are going to come from, is when you're playing around with this. The two sides that don't have the sashing on them can be cut right up to the top, so that you are still having your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, but you don't need any excess batting or backing on those two sides. The sides that have the sashing need an extra 1/4 inch to be able to sew the block together and have enough on the back to curl under and hand stitch. So this is what the block will look like when you cut it. So you've got your non-sashed sides cut flush to the top of the block, and your sashed sides you've got cut a quarter of an inch beyond the top. So you've got the backing and the batting will be extending out from those two sides by 1/4 inch. So what we want to do is make sure that you line up the block. The one that goes on top is the joining side, the one with the sashing. So we're going to just fold back the batting and the backing and pin that out of place. So the only thing you're stitching together then is the top of the joining block together with the entire underneath block, the one without the sashing. So that includes the top, the batting, and the backing. And I'm just going to do this little corner because I want to take it out and use one of these blocks for later. But 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so here's what that looks like. Pretend I'm at the end of it here and I've got a 1/4 inch going. There's no extra bulk there in the seam. You see that? It's just the top together with these. What you'll do then is you'll press this out. This batting will be covering the seam. You're going to cut that batting until it matches up with this here. Okay, so once that's flush, you give it another press, and then you take this and you just fold it over one time and you pin it in. Oh, let's get that out of there. Okay, so we've cut that away. You pin it in place and you hand stitch, hand applique this down. So now you've got 2 blocks quilted, sewn together, and you would just keep adding, quilting and adding blocks that way. You would do 2 full rows that way, and then you would do the rows together the same exact way. The top, what I do, because this has gone all the way to the batting and you want to leave that 1/2 inch when you're sewing the rows together, you can either take out, just snip out those few stitches, no big deal. Okay, just snip them out. If you remember, you can stop short 1/2 of an inch there and just leave that hanging, and that way you can hand stitch it later once it's all joined. But if you forget and you go on, you see how easy it is just to snip those. And then you're free to join the entire row with just this top layer of sashing to the very tops of the blocks. And that's why you don't need to put sashing on the tops of the blocks, because this is the sashing that would go in between them. And that's basically it. That's how you would sew a quilt together with blocks that you've already done with sashing included. Of course, I'm promoting my book, so if you like the idea of sewing blocks and sections together, please check that out. There's so much information in there about choosing quilting and your thread setup and putting these blocks together so that you can manage this by yourself. I think it's a great book, so I hope you do too. Of course, let me know if you have any questions at all, and I would be happy to answer them. I'd be happy to walk you through. If you get stuck in any way, I'm here and available and connected, so please shoot me any questions or comments that you have. I'm happy to help you through this, because I really want you to have success with quilting your own quilts.